Welcome into One-on-One Nightly. I'm Ryan Gregoire. My host is Thomas Aiello, and keeping the lights on is the great Alex Waltz. We have a great show today. It was a beautiful day out, less than 24 hours out from the NFL draft. Thomas, as a Jets fan, honestly, the draft is probably my favorite day of the year because the season really, it never gets better after the draft. It goes downhill from there. So we're going to talk about the draft, some of the storylines, they're coming up. But before we get to everything else that we're going to talk about, how are you doing today?
Ryan, I'm doing fantastic. I was able to spend my entire day outside. I threw the baseball around. It was a wonderful day to be outside. And you know what? You just make the most of it. And just to go back to your point about the draft, as a Jets fan, I'm a Green Bay fan. So the draft is my least favorite day because they always manage to mess up every draft pick with the exception of Kenny Clark the last couple of years. So it is your favorite day, but it is not my favorite day. But I am happy to be here with you because this will make my day and our day today.
Yeah, well, listen, I'd rather my favorite days be during football Sundays, but they haven't been recently. So you got to take what you can get. So we'll start with that, and then we'll go into my team, my Jets, because there's been a lot of talk about number 2, right? Zach Wilson is probably the guy there, but people are kind of like overlooking. They have another first rounder. The Jamal Adams trade happened. I'm happy right now as it stands with the trade. They have 23 this year. They'll have another first next year. So we'll kind of get into all that and who they're looking at for 23.
Yeah, this is definitely going to be an exciting show. And for the Jets, Ryan, we get started at the number 2 pick. I'm really on the Zach Wilson train. I like what they did this offseason. I like the addition of Corey Davis. And they've brought in Lawson from Cincinnati, and they've signed a couple other guys. They're going to have CJ Mosley back. So Robert Saleh's the head coach. This is definitely an exciting time for the Jets. And Zach Wilson could be that little cherry on top of – it's not a complete sundae yet. You're still missing, I think, a scoop of ice cream and some whipped cream. But it's definitely a great foundation that Joe Douglas has put together. But you know the Jets better than I do. And Joe Douglas is a quiet guy. He is private. So for all we know, we could be getting – phased here where he won't take Zach Wilson and he's going to take Trey Lance. Anything can happen, I think, with him. But I love the foundation that the Jets have put together. They've given whoever their quarterback's going to be the chance to succeed in their first year. That's great. That's really good. I mean, you should be proud of that. This is one of your best off seasons in your lifetime. Might be your best off season you've seen in a lifetime, Ryan.
Yeah, we'll have the answer to that in less than 24 hours with the 8 o'clock draft tomorrow. And then we'll kind of finish up with some NFL talk. Teddy Bridgewater got traded from the Panthers to the Broncos today. And then we'll go into maybe some teams that we think should be trading up possibly for a quarterback. Then we'll come back with some MLB talk. We're both Yankee fans. The weird stretch right now. The season couldn't have started worse. They're playing a little bit better now, but it's tough to kind of get a gauge of what this team really is.
Definitely going to be tough to gauge. And the Yankees have been frustrating. However, they are crushing the Orioles right now live on Yes Network. So that's always a good sign. And you know what? Some of the players that at the beginning of the year that have started off slow have really turned it around. Gleyber Torres, Aaron Hicks has come alive a bit. Kyle Higashioka is rising to prominence for the Yankees. So you know what? Maybe the Yankees might actually be able to turn it around. This is going to be – I'm excited for that conversation, Ryan. You have no idea how excited I am for that one.
Yeah, I was going to talk about how I thought yesterday's game was the most complete win of the season, but, it's early, but this night certainly looks like it could be. And then we'll get into some NL East talk with the Mets and kind of that whole division. It's been rather up and down this year. The Mets are currently leading it at 9-9. I don't think anyone saw that coming. And then we'll finish up our baseball talk with some Dodgers Padres. They just played a big series last weekend. We'll kind of talk about who we think is built better long-term, not really just the regular season, but the playoffs obviously a long ways away, but they look like juggernauts right now. So we'll talk about kind of where we think they can end up. And then we'll go with some NBA talk. Obviously, the Knicks. We'll kind of give a state of the Knicks. Obviously, the 9-game win streak just came to an end. But there's 10 games left on their schedule, including Chicago Bulls, who they're playing right now. So we'll keep an eye on that game. We'll kind of give a schedule outlook and what needs to happen the rest of the way for the Knicks to kind of get back in the playoffs.
This is an exciting show, Ryan, and I'm glad that I'm here to join you for the ride. So let's get into it, baby.
All right, yeah. So then let's just get into it right now then, Thomas.
Let's do it, yeah.
All right. So we'll start with the NFL draft talk. And yesterday, there was a report that came out a few days ago maybe about how the 49ers at number 3 after trading up 2-3 are locked in between Trey Lance and Mac Jones. It's a really interesting conversation. Obviously, the big question is where's Justin Fields in this conversation? But overall, I'm going to start with you, Thomas. What are your kind of initial thoughts to the 49ers focusing on these two quarterbacks?
Okay, I'm going to bring up a comparison here. When you go sneaker shopping and you see all the sneakers on the wall and you go, oh, I really like all of those sneakers. Well, yeah, obviously you like all the sneakers, but you can't have all of them. You got to pick one. So, I mean, I don't know what the 49ers are going to do. They're a mysterious quarterback team. I mean, between Alex Smith all those years ago, I mean, that worked out really well, but now it's been Jimmy Garoppolo and it's kind of been a carousel in between. I don't know who the San Francisco 49ers are going to take, to be honest with you. It's definitely an up in the air kind of conversation. And if we look at the team around whoever their quarterback is going to be, we'll say, for example, I'll just use Trey Lance. He has all of the weapons to succeed coming out of the gate. I mean, you've got Deebo Samuel, George Kittle. He's got Brandon Ayuk, Raheem Mostert. He's got a fantastic offensive line, a defense that they can fall back on. From top to bottom, this 49ers team is just really good. There's no real weakness. I mean, I don't really see one, but other than the quarterback. So here we are, we're 24 hours or so from the draft, like you said, and they like all of the quarterbacks. Well, that's the point of the draft. You like everyone, but you can only have one. Goes back to the sneaker reference. And the aforementioned Trey Lance is the guy I want them to take. I like the idea of a strong arm. I like him, maybe throwing a little deeper for Deebo, George Kittle, who can run some deep routes, also can play short, but it's also a yards after the catch based offense for the most part. They run these little quick slant routes, these little pullback routes, and then it's like, okay, go get 8-7 yards after that catch. So, but I like the idea of taking Trey Lance. It definitely is a new element that comes to this offense. And the thing with him is that he is very motivated. There was an article I saw from NBC Sports, Ryan. He was on the, I think, Dan Patrick show, and he was saying, I'm ready to prove everyone wrong again. I don't know how you can turn that kind of attitude down, especially in the NFL draft, because not many rookies in most sports, I'd say, come in with that aggressive, oh yeah, here's who I am mentality. So I think just from that standpoint, it can add something different. And again, the strong arm, he can also move. He's got good legs. He ran for 14 rushing touchdowns in 2019. So there's definitely some promise here as a dual threat quarterback with the arm and the legs. But it's going to be interesting to see how he can read a defense. Patrick Mahomes admitted it took me, like he said, 2 or 3 years to really read a defense in the NFL. So I like Trey Lance a lot, but for the 49ers, please pick one person. Please, for the sake of everyone, pick one.
Well, I think this conversation, like when you boil it down to it, it's Mac Jones versus Trey Lance is Kyle Shanahan versus kind of the scouting department.
Yeah.
We know who Kyle Shanahan wants. He wants Mac Jones. Mac Jones fits the mold of Kyle Shanahan quarterbacks. We saw Matt Ryan and Kirk Cousins, two guys who I think comp similar to Mac Jones, have their best years with Shanahan. He's obviously a wizard. He is kind of the face of this franchise, so I think that's where the power struggle comes in. But then you look at it from the scouting department, Trey Lance has all the tools in the world, as you talked about, 28 touchdowns, 0 picks in his lone year starting at North Dakota State. The concern there is he hasn't been on the field that much. He has 1 year starting, played one showcase game this fall. You can't really take anything from that. So I think that's where the debate comes in because you just don't know with him. It's so much more of a risk. I think Mac Jones is the safer prospect. He is the more ready prospect. But you traded up multiple first-round picks. You traded your capital to get to 3. And I was under the assumption it was because they had a guy locked in. So we don't know on that aspect. It should be reported that later in the week after, these reports came out, Shanahan had a wild press conference. He said originally they had like 5 QBs. Then he was asked if Jimmy Garoppolo would be on the roster Sunday. He said he doesn't know if anyone on the planet is going to be alive Sunday. So there's just a lot to take away from Kyle Shanahan. We just don't know. But the draft's coming up. Other reports have been shown that they were all in on Mac Jones. And as this process has came along, the gap has gotten tighter and tighter and tighter. But the other aspect of this is where's Justin Fields' name? Because Justin Fields was a guy who coming into this year was 1A and 1B with Trevor Lawrence. It was Trevor Lawrence and Justin Fields right under him. And he didn't do really enough this year to kind of fall as QB4 or even QB5 in this draft. I remember I said this on Saturday's show, but after that performance against Clemson in the college football playoffs, I saw him, with the Jets jersey everywhere on Instagram and Twitter. It looked like he was a lock to go number 2. He showed his guts in that game. He played injured. He outdueled the first overall pick, presumptively, in Trevor Lawrence. But at the same time, the narrative that's been building with him after that has been so fascinating to see, because we've seen his work ethic being questioned. We've seen his intangibles being questioned. First one, last one in, first one out. And I think it's an unfair narrative that's got built against him. And I don't know if the media really has a say in your draft stock, but if Justin Fields falls to QB4, I think you absolutely can make that case.
I think you absolutely have to. And QB4 is the Atlanta Falcons, who, I mean, Matt Ryan's sort of on the precipice of ending his career. It's the twilight zone, if you will. And a lot of people think that the Falcons could take to Kyle Pitts. You know what? Look, if you, like you said, if Justin Fields falls, and he's a really good talent as well. He is a very good talent. He's got legs. He's got a pretty good arm. And the fact that he can go toe to toe with Trevor Lawrence is just mesmerizing to me, because Trevor Lawrence was kind of seen as Thor. Like, he's literally a physical embodiment of Thor, the Avenger, with the gold hair. And he's just like this almighty quarterback at Clemson. And he's got Travis Etienne. He's got all these weapons and this team that's just so good. And then here comes Justin Fields, who's like, nah, man, I'm Loki. I'm going to go toe to toe with you. And you know what? You can't pass on Justin Fields. I think he's a good talent. He can definitely fix up a team. But the Mac Jones discussion is, I saw a hilarious thing on Twitter today. It goes, Mac Jones, when his quarterbacks don't get 12 feet of separation, he's just looking up like this. And he's in the Broncos jersey, right? I mean, as a joke, obviously, but I'm not that high on Mac Jones. I think I agree with you. Justin Fields is definitely better than him. Intangibles, IQ, physical talent, he's definitely better. And Mac Jones also, the same thing with what I'm saying with these weapons to succeed. He had Jalen Waddle and Devontae Smith, who won the Heisman. So his team was absolutely loaded. And Justin Fields, you could argue Ohio State, it was like kind of like this with Alabama, the echelon of player, as they were the 1 and 2, obviously, in the championship game. But look, if Justin Fields is there, if you're any of the team that doesn't take him within the first 2 picks, you should pounce on that opportunity.
Well, the one thing I want to talk about with the Ohio State thing that you mentioned is there is a narrative too that's working against Fields, where he's an Ohio State quarterback. They always stink. So what's the point? When has an Alabama quarterback ever been that guy? Tagovailoa is really the best prospect they ever had, but he's improving anything in the NFL. So I think that if you're going to discredit him for that, and then you're going to rise up Mac Jones, who, as you said, he was thrown to a Heisman Trophy winner. He was throwing to track stars out there. They were 15 yards down the field before there was any separation. Now, credit to Mac Jones, because he was able to hit them. He did a fantastic year. He really did rise up the draft boards. He was a late 3rd round pick projected and late 1st, and now he's 3rd overall projected. So credit to Mac Jones. I'm not taking anything away, but Justin Fields did not do enough to fall down these draft boards. I don't understand that at all. The other thing that I don't really get either is, like, people talk about Mac Jones as this like smart creature of habit, but then they don't give that same credit to Justin Fields and Trey Lance. Those guys got Ivy League offers coming out, and Mac Jones is the guy with multiple DUIs. So like that narrative, I don't get either. I don't know, man. It's like, it's such a weird thing that we've run with these narratives, and now Mac Jones looks like he'd go 3, he'd go all the way to 15, and Justin Fields looks like best case scenario, he's QB4. Like, that's absolute best case. He's not going to be QB1 or 2. That's absolutely certain. He's very likely not going to be QB3. And then a team will probably choose. If it's between Trey Lance and Justin Fields, I think that's a real debate, because both have legit talent where you can kind of go back and forth. But if you're talking about a talent perspective, Mac Jones, and Justin Fields, that's not even a conversation. Justin Fields blows them out of the water.
Justin Fields, yeah.
Yeah.
I definitely agree with you on that. I was just saying, like, their overall teams, it was because they were the 1 and 2, but I think Fields is by far better. And like you said, with Mac Jones DUI versus Justin Fields getting an offer from Harvard, I mean, that's kind of that was a funny tidbit, I thought. And your thing with Alabama quarterbacks, you're absolutely right. AJ McCarron, what has he done? Tua Tagovailoa is Tua turn over the ball. And I don't even know who the heck was Derrick Henry's quarterback when he was there. I don't even remember who that was. Like, they just, not to sound chalk, but the Alabama quarterbacks just are not good. And between the Fields and Jones thing, I mean, I guess you could take Fields. He definitely has more upside. And Mac Jones, I guess, has proven to mesh with stars. But any average slightly above average quarterback can do that. I mean, Jared Goff has been the epitome of that idea with the Los Angeles Rams for years. Now we're going to see if he's a really good quarterback this year in Detroit. That is yet to be seen. But I feel if you have to talk between Jones and Fields, if you're a team that is desperate for a quarterback and say, look, we need someone who can throw the football immediately, I think it should be without question, all right, we're going to take Justin Fields. And that should be it. There should be no other words spoken after that. There should be none.
Yeah, the last point I'll make on this before we shift in the draft here is that if you're going for the more ready quarterback, if that's why you're picking a guy at number 3, then why not keep Jimmy Garoppolo around to be the more ready guy from day one, right? If you take a Trey Lance, who's more developmental for sure, you could have him wait. You could have Jimmy Garoppolo play 6 games, train with the deadline, and then hand, Trey Lance the reign. So from that perspective, I don't get it. But listen, at the end of the day, Kyle Shanahan, he's a lot smarter than me and you, Thomas. So if he goes Mac Jones, I will be all in on that because I trust Kyle Shanahan. He's so smart and he's been so good with quarterbacks. I will buy whatever he does. But personally, I don't really understand this narrative. Let's shift over to the Jets really quickly. We talked about Zach Wilson, locked to go number 2, but let's kind of talk about the other pick because as I talked about in the open, it's not really discussed about. This is a big 23rd overall pick for the Jets. This isn't a team who's a quarterback away. This team has a ton of holes. So I'll start with you at 23. Who are some of kind of the guys you're looking at to get this team in the right direction?
Okay, so when you're building an NFL team, specifically a defense, there's 2 things that really stand out to me that I feel that are so imperative that you should have. A field general linebacker, so essentially a play caller back there, and a really strong secondary. Because in the NFL, this is a pass-heavy league. Everyone's throwing deep. Everyone's throwing passes just in general. So with that 23rd pick, Ryan, your Jets, for me, should take Greg Newsome, the cornerback from Northeastern. Now, I know that last year, your secondary was not particularly good, to put it nicely. Now, Marcus May had that one miracle play versus the Rams, and he had that his interception that he caught with his behind. So other than that, there really was nothing to cheer about for the most part. And according to Pro Football Focus last year, the Jets were the 5th worst secondary in 2020. So clearly in need, like you said, a lot of reinforcements. However, they've addressed some of that. They signed LaMarcus Joyner on a 1-year contract, which was a good signing. They brought in Justin Hardy. That was another really good signing. And I think if you want to kind of stagger that, Greg Newsome, he's a young cornerback, and we know that young cornerbacks in the NFL, they take a little time to really adjust because they're not guarding, say, you or I, or I'm 5'10", you're maybe a little taller than me, but we're obviously not crazy athletes where we can run really fast, jump really high, hands the size of baseball mitts. He's kind of guarding people like us. When you go to the NFL, these are grown men, and these are incredibly physically gifted grown men. So I feel like boosting that cornerback position would be really good for the Jets. It definitely, I could say for now, band-aids that hole a bit in the secondary, definitely kind of stabilizes them in that back. And like I said, with Joyner and Hardy, you have 2 legitimate good secondary players there to start teaching, to add to Marcus May. CJ Mosley's coming back. I think that going for secondary and Greg Newsome would be a good fit for Robert Saleh's defense. I think it would be a very good, not a total mess up, a safe pick for the Jets.
Okay, so a few things there. You talk about the secondary. It's absolutely a need. I think you said it was the 5th worst. Thomas, I'll tell you, the only reason it was 5th worst is because they went down so many points. Teams just ran out the clock.
Yeah.
There was no guys in the secondary last year. So they definitely need to address that later in the draft. But I don't think that's what they're going to do round 1. And this is based off Joe Douglas' track record. He said from day one, the offensive line's always been his number 1 priority. You've seen it at his previous stops. Baltimore, he built up that Super Bowl line. And Philadelphia, he built up that Super Bowl O-line. So that's always been a priority for him. We saw it last year. He took Mekhi Becton in the 1st round, and they didn't really go out in free agency and spend. They missed out on Joe Tooney. They missed out on Lindsley, the center. So they're going to need to address that in the draft, and that's what I think they'll do. So I don't know who's going to be there. One guy I would take if he was there is Tevin Jenkins, the lineman from OK State. He can play guard or tackle, which will be useful because with George Fant, he's not really a long-term guy, so you can shift that and see where he goes. Tevin Jenkins is a violent blocker. He's been compared to Quentin Nelson. I think that's like his best case comp. And so I don't know if he'll be there at 23. There's also been reports that he's one of Joe Douglas's top guys, but that's a guy I'd look at. Another kind of Other position you didn't mention is you need pass rushers in this league. Your cornerbacks don't mean anything if you're not getting after the passer, because then the quarterback's going to just sit in the pocket and hit guys. So I would look at Gregory Rousseau at 23. I don't know if he really fits there. He's been all over the place. He was supposed to be a top 10 pick going into the year. Things happened, COVID. He's fallen out of favor there. But I would still look at the O-line. Another guy, Elijah Vera Tucker, guard out of USC. He's probably been the best pass blocking lineman, and he's really good in that zone blocking scheme that Mikey LaFleur is going to install. So if I'm looking at the Jets and Joe Douglas, I kind of see this draft going QB, obviously, at number 2, like no question about that. And then I would personally go O-line at 23. I think there's enough guys between the two I mentioned, a few other Bama guys, Wyatt Davis from Ohio State, that you could look at 23. And then that early second, I look at wide receiver. I think that's definitely a position that you can grab day 2. Denzel Mims is unproven, and you need to shore up that wide receiver 2 with Jameson Crowder in the slot and Corey Davis outright. And then you talked about the cornerbacks. I'd absolutely go corner with that extra second and third. I definitely do think that's a need, but I do see the Jets kind of going O-line early, Thomas.
Yeah, I mean, O-line is that's probably the most important position in football, because pretty much your entire offense would be predicated, especially running backs, on the offensive line. And you mentioned Elijah Vera Tucker, who I think could be a good pass blocker, especially if the Jets want to run that pass-heavy offense. And you said before, you have Crowder, Davis, Denzel Mims, who could be good. I think he has the chance to be a pretty physical receiver, sort of like a better Tim Patrick, if you will, if you want to go that far. I feel like there's definitely something there with him. And you also mentioned building up the offensive line again as well. I'll just kind of stick with that theme. I don't know how much more I can emphasize Mekhi Becton is going to be probably the best left tackle one day. He's a gigantic human being. He literally can stop anyone who wants to attempt to, I guess, pressure the quarterback. And George Fant, unfortunately, it just really isn't that good. So I feel like the Jets, they definitely need to go with some offensive lineman versatility here, like you said. Now, you obviously know the Jets better than I do because you're a fan. And that's the team that you have watched throughout the years. So I'm going to go with you on that offensive line scheme as well, because they do kind of need that. But the pass rushing linebacker as well, I think with the defensive front 7 positions have been sort of all over the place. Like you said, they're really hard to predict. I mean, Rosso, he could be good. We don't know. There's also Kwity Paye. I mean, I don't know if you're going to be high enough to get him. There's Azeez Ojulari, who may or may not be there. So there's a lot of different choices, I guess, for the Jets to go if they want to go that route. The question is, it's a scheme fit at this point, because like I just said, they've been impossible to predict for this draft. So I see that sort of as a hit or miss, but offensive line and the secondary, they definitely need to bolster. There's a lot of help needed there. And like you said, this Jets team has a lot of holes they've got to plug. So hopefully Joe Douglas can plug those holes. And I mean, I guess emphasizing the offensive line is a really good place to start. And then addressing the secondary is a good place to start.
Yeah, I can't emphasize enough how tough of a draft this is to evaluate. It's completely unprecedented.
Yeah.
Teams don't have access to medicals, like they just don't have access like they are used to having. So you don't know on that aspect. Obviously, guys sat out seasons. So you're looking back years at tape. You don't have as much to work with. So it's so hard. It's certainly, you don't love having 2 firsts in a draft like this where there's a ton of unknowns, but obviously you'll take it. And so I think that's why we've seen a lot of these teams who haven't been reluctant. They've been giving up the first rounders because it is so hard to predict. Seahawks GM today kind of made a joke in passing how it's going to be a great draft. They have a ton of picks. They only have 3 picks. So, I mean, at the end of the day, you build teams with the draft. So I don't know why he's laughing that much. But for sure, it's going to be really tough to evaluate. I think offensive line is the right play for the Jets. I really do. I don't want to see Zach Wilson get killed the way Sam Darnold did. It was really tough to see the last few years. But speaking of Sam Darnold, his current team, the Panthers, traded away his competition in Teddy Bridgewater yesterday. And, Teddy Bridgewater, he's had a tough go when it comes to Sam Darnold. Obviously, he was on the Jets that Sam Darnold rookie year, was traded in training camp to the Saints. Then Sam Darnold gets traded to his current team, and he's out the door. So this is one I thought was really interesting because the Panthers didn't necessarily, have to trade him. He's only on the books for like 10.5 guaranteed, and that's nothing crazy, especially with what they're working with. But they trade him to the Broncos, and I think that's a really good fit because they have said all offseason they want to find a guy to push Drew Lock. They really do need to find a guy to push Drew Lock because there are legit questions about his play. It really is a do or die year for him. This will kind of get him motivated. He's going to have to play well here. Thomas, what were your initial thoughts on this trade?
Sam Darnold does it again. That was my first thought when I saw the tweet from Ian Rappaport today. And only for a 6th round pick. Okay. I mean, sure, fine. I'll take the draft capital if I'm the Panthers. But Drew Lock, you talked about him, brought him up. His literal football reads in terms of like passing the damn thing is all over the place. I can't tell you like if he can actually throw the football sometimes. It's really that bad. And I think bringing in Bridgewater will sort of go, hey, you got to be the guy or you're off the team. This is a really good, I think, trade for the Broncos in terms of getting the most out of their players. Now, I want to go back to the draft real quick because they do have the 9th pick. And I originally had them taking Justin Fields, but now that Bridgewater's there with Drew Lock, I don't know what they do. That they can go to like a cornerback. I don't know. We can talk about that another time, but this was definitely a good trade for both teams in a way that Sam Darnold's now going to get a chance to succeed in the Joe Brady offensive scheme. And he's got DJ Moore. He's going to reunite with Robbie Anderson. Christian McCaffrey's coming back. So the Carolina Panthers, they've got a pretty promising young team, at least on the offensive side. There's definitely some real stuff there. And then for the Broncos, Teddy Bridgewater and Drew Lock, I'm sure going to battle it out in training camp. It's going to be a war between those two. And both of them will have serious chances to succeed. I mean, it's Vic Fangio, and the Broncos have a good weapons system. They've got Cortland Sutton, Jerry Jeudy, who showed a lot of promise in his rookie year. Noah Fant, who I'm a big fan of. I really like Noah Fant a lot. And then the defense is coming back. They've got Kyle Fuller, who they snagged from the Bears. Von Miller's on his way back. And they've brought in some quality cornerbacks. They've run Ronald Darby, chief among the free agent signings. So this Denver Broncos situation and the Panthers situation is very intriguing. And of course, the quarterback is the most important position in football. And that's not even debate. And you and I both know that. Whoever gets it is going to really change the direction of the team. And I'm talking about the Broncos between Locke and Bridgewater. Whoever gets that starting quarterback position, you're going left or you're going right. There's no in between in this at this point. This is all or nothing for both of them. And I think this is the perfect team for both of them to prove that they can still play in football.
Well, I mean, if you're keeping Drew Lock, you're on the trajectory you hope to be on, right?
Yeah.
The Broncos hope that Teddy Bridgewater doesn't see the field. They're not doing this to kind of like get the better quarterback of the two. No, they need Drew Lock to be the better quarterback of the two. They drafted him to be the franchise quarterback. They gave him the weapons last offseason, going wide receiver in the first 2 rounds. So this move is not to kind of, like see what you have in Teddy. This is to push Drew Lock to be the best he can be. You mentioned Vic Fangio. I think this is a do or die year for him. I'll say it right now. They need to win football games. And what I do know about Teddy Bridgewater, I think the most fair way to evaluate him is he is a starting NFL quarterback. He's nothing crazier than that, but he certainly is a starting quarterback. He's not going to let you down when it comes to that. He doesn't have spectacular talent, but he gets the job done if needed to be. So obviously we see, he wasn't a ton of demand, a 6th rounder here, but the hope here is you can push Drew Lock here. You can get him to be the best player he can be because he has all the tools, right? He's so raw. We saw what he had at Mizzou. He certainly can unlock it, and they just have to unlock it because throughout 2 years, it's been up and down. We don't know really what to make of him, but what we do know is they need to win games badly for Vic Fangio to keep the job. So I think that's exactly what this is. And I want to talk about the Panthers for a second because I have a little theory here, and I know they just traded 3 picks to get Sam Darnold. I have a Sam Darnold jersey literally 5 feet from me, so I'm obviously a big fan of his. But I don't think it's out of the question, Thomas, that they go for a Justin Fields if he falls, right? When they do that trade with the Jets, there's no way there was any shot anyone thought Justin Fields was falling to 8. This kind of late fall rise of other guys, that was not the norm, 4 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago when they did that trade, whenever it was. So I see a world where you trade Teddy Bridgewater, you get rid of that salary. They still haven't picked up Sam Darnold's 5th-year option, so we don't know if they're all the way in on him. And if Justin Fields falls to 8, how are you going to pass on a rookie contract, right? You're not going to have to be paying him $18 million in a year like Sam Darnold. So I see a world where, I don't know, I think if Justin Fields does fall, I can see a scenario where he goes to 8. But that is, let me say, that is very unlikely. It appears that with this trade, it's more confirmation that they are in on Sam Darnold. So that is kind of what I'd go with now, but I certainly could see a world where a quarterback isn't out of the question.
No, I absolutely agree. And last season, Teddy Bridgewater on the Panthers, I mean, they didn't exactly finish with the best of records, but he was incredibly passive. Now, I think Justin Fields, it's sort of kind of okay, you know what? We've got something new. He's a good athlete. He's probably a better athlete than Darnold and Bridgewater, I'd say, with his legs. So you got something new. Again, this is another chance for him to succeed with the foundation they've put in place, with the weapons he has. There's definitely an emerging defense on that Panthers team. So I do kind of see where you're going with Justin Fields. Don't not pass up on him because he's going to be right there if he does fall. And this has been one of the most hyped quarterbacks of all the draft, the whole college football season, the whole 11, 10 months, whatever it's been, that he's just like, oh my God, it's Justin Fields or Trevor Lawrence, make or break. So I feel like if he's there, you should take him. And I feel like it would be good competition for Sam. And also, in the same sense, gives Fields a chance to go, hey, I can play too. So maybe they do a thing like the Dolphins did last year where, okay, we've got Tua Tagovailoa. We don't really know what his deal is. Can he play football? Can he not play football? So we're going to start Fitzmagic just to see. And the Dolphins surprisingly got off to a pretty solid start. And I was one of the people last year, I written the Dolphins off. And then Tua comes in and they finished the year 10-6. Now Fitzmagic did come back in a little bit. There was sort of an aiding process with the quarterback thing. But I feel like that's going to happen here with the Panthers. I feel like they're going to do all right, we're going to play Darnold. Let's see what he can give us. And if it's just really not working, and I hope he succeeds for the sake of you, for the sake of Jets fans, because he was imprisoned and tortured by the Joe Douglas-ness of the Jets the last couple seasons. So hopefully Sam does succeed. I want him to succeed. But if they bench Sam and Justin Fields lights the state of Carolina on fire, I don't think there's a question that he should be the starting quarterback. So again, if Fields is there, you take him and you see what you got with those two. So that's my thing for the Panthers.
Well, that analogy, I don't necessarily buy in, right? Because Ryan Fitzpatrick's on the other side of 35.
Yeah.
Sam Darnold is 23 years old. So it's different there. And I think it's completely unfair to Sam if you're half in, half out. They have said they're all in. I just think it would come down to you see a talent fall that wasn't expected to. That's what I think the Fields thing comes in. I don't think it's necessarily, I'm not a fan of just bringing a guy to push Sam Darnold, let the best guy wins. You traded a second and 2 other picks, and then you use your other first rounder. So that's really 4 picks on a quarterback, and you don't know which one. So I don't necessarily buy that, but I do think 100% there is a scenario where that comes to play. I don't know how likely it is. I hope it doesn't. I don't think it will, but I could see that happening. Last segment here for football. We're going to talk about, obviously with the draft, there's always trade-ups. Some we see coming, some we know need a quarterback. Some are not so much. Some kind of come out of nowhere. There's some teams this year, the football team, Bears, Steelers, maybe some other teams that could look to trade up. Some have some older quarterbacks. Some have some unproven quarterbacks. Is there a team out there, Thomas, that you think should be trading up or will be trading up tomorrow?
I really like the idea of the Bears going up because the Bears have been the Bears. They just have not had a good offseason. They released Kyle Fuller. Eddie Jackson went on Twitter and he's like, man, what are you guys doing? The quarterback situation's a mess between Nick Foles. Trubisky had his thing. He's gone, though. So I see the Bears trading up. That's the one, I guess, if they're really desperate for a quarterback, because poor Allen Robinson, man, free him. Free Allen Robinson. He's just stuck on an island out there in the Great Lake area. He's just him. Cole Kmet's, he's all right. I think he's going to be a solid tight end, but he's still, I think, a couple seasons away. Darnell Mooney, he's got some potential. He's really good. He's really fast, but I think he needs another season of getting spiced up a little bit. But I think that trading up for a quarterback for the Bears is going to be imperative in this draft. And they've just not had a good quarterback. I can't even count the last time they had a good quarterback. And I feel if Justin Fields falls, because it seems all indications he's going to fall for some reason, why, I don't know. You take him. You trade up to whatever it is. I have them going to the 14th pick with the Vikings. They could go as high. I don't know. Could they go to Denver at the 9th pick maybe and try to snag him if he falls that far? I mean, they could. They could also go the Mac Jones route, but then that comes into play. Is Mac Jones really that good where it's only going to be Allen Robinson this time? So it's a lot of things that go into this. But I think the most realistic one is that the Bears will trade up to the 9th pick with Denver. to take Justin Fields if he falls. And we have both been saying it so far in the show. Do not pass up on Justin Fields. The potential, the upside is so high. It's like, why, if you pass on him, like, I'll just laugh at you for eternity. So that is my trade, because they're just so desperate for a quarterback. And their defense is phenomenal. Let's get that out of the way. They have a really good defense, the Bears. But you got to play the other side of the football. They need a quarterback. They're going to I think they're going to be the team to trade up, and they're going to try and snag Justin Fields wherever they can if he does fall.
Yeah, the reason I'm not necessarily on that is because Matt Nagy needs to win games this year. He does not have time, neither does Ryan Pace, to work on a guy, and you're going to give away more draft collateral. I don't think that's smart. Listen, I would have never signed Andy Dalton. I would have went to draft throughout the whole time. But you're going to put $10 million into Andy Dalton and trade more picks to get a quarterback. I don't necessarily know if I see it. I would do it, but I just don't see Ryan Pace trading more draft capital. He's already traded a ton. The one team that I see that I don't know if they will, but I will, I really want them to. As someone who's not a fan, I root for the football team, right? I root for their success. And I think that they really should be in the market for a quarterback in this draft. They obviously signed Ryan Fitzpatrick, but he's a stopgap guy. We know he's not going to take it to the playoffs. He's never done so in his 10-plus year career. And this is a Super Bowl defense. This defense is good enough to win a Super Bowl. So I don't want to waste these years while you have these guys in their prime on an old quarterback who's low ceiling, right? His absolute ceiling is maybe what they were this year. Does he move the needle that much? Is he going to play that much better than Taylor Heineke did in that playoff game? No, he's just not. So I would trade up if you see a Trey Lance, if you see a Justin Fields, because the other aspect is you get that quarterback contract. That's such an aspect in today's game where you build a Super Bowl roster while you don't have to pay the quarterback, because, that's an extra $30 million in cap. The Chiefs, whatever. We can go through all the teams that have done so, but I could see them doing it. They can keep that defense intact for the next 4 years. If a guy falls, I think Justin Fields will be a match made in heaven there. I don't think they ever expect him to fall there. So I'd love that fit. I'd love Trey Lance, because you could do a Dolphins. That is a Dolphins parallel with Ryan Fitzpatrick, and then you turn the reins to Trey Lance midseason. So the team that I'm kind of looking at to trade up is the football team. I think they definitely should. Will they? I don't know. I hope they do for their sake, though.
Yeah, I mean, the football team they surprised the heck out of everybody. Colin Cowherd had them finishing last, I think, on his show. And then they posted on their TikTok, we won the division. Oh, like, we're so good. The football team. So I thought that was a really good way to come full circle and end their season. And now, unfortunately, they did have to play Tampa. It's Tampa Brady and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They had to go through him, and they didn't even get through him. In fact, they got annihilated by Tom. But there's a lot of promise on this football team. Their front four alone is terrifying, okay? I think if I ever saw Chase Young, Ioannis, who's the third guy that's on their defensive line, whose name escapes me, forgive me, but his name escapes me, I would just sit down and cry. If they were just like charging at me in the street, I'm just enjoying like an ice cold smoothie on a sunny day on the beach, and they're just charging at me in rage. Like, I'm going to just sit down and cry. It's a terrifying front. Any quarterback would be petrified. Any offensive line will be petrified of them. And Chase Young is pushing almost 300 pounds, and he can return the football on a fumble for a touchdown like he's a running back. I have no words for how good this guy is. So the quarterback is the only piece that they're really missing, because you have Terry McLaurin, you've signed Curtis Samuel, which was very good. They have Antonio Gibson. So there's some serious weapons there that has real potential. We already know T-Mac can play. Now, can Curtis Samuel, Antonio Gibson, are they going to take that second-year leap? That remains to be seen. But I feel the quarterback part is what they're really missing. And like we talked about earlier, the Dolphins thing with Fitzpatrick kind of holding the hand of the rookie quarterback behind him, that could be a good thing. And if it's Justin Fields, take it. So be it. If it's Mac Jones, I mean, do you run potential in that? You could. But I like the Justin Fields idea. They can definitely trade up. So we're going to see. I mean, a lot of people are going to be going after Fields because he's going to fall. And that's just how it's kind of the tea leaves are aligning at this point.
Yeah, so we're about 24 hours out. We'll know in a day or two, so can't wait for that. We're going to take a quick break here. We're going to come back with some Yankees talk, some Mets talk, some overall baseball talk. We got a ton left to talk about, so make sure you stay tuned to One-on-One Nightly. We are back here on One Nightly. Ryan Gregoire alongside Thomas Aiello. We're going to talk some baseball. We're going to start with the Yankees, who right now, they're adding the encouragement that we've seen so far. They're up 6-0. Domingo Germán with 7 shutout innings. We'll see if he comes out back for the 8th, top of the 8th right now. But overall, the Yankees obviously started the year very poorly, Thomas. Last in the AL through 2 weeks. They're in a weird stretch right now. 5-3 in their last 8, looking to get to 6-3 in their last 9. So that's pretty encouraging, but even in this kind of stretch, they've had games where they haven't hit. The pitching's come along a little bit. I just want to start early on, Thomas. What have kind of been your thoughts on possibly the Yankees turning the corner here and starting to win some ball games?
You know what? Look, everyone in baseball, it's a marathon, not a sprint. Let's get that out of the way, okay? The Washington Nationals were terrible. I wouldn't say terrible. They were pretty average to the first half of 2019, and then they just win the World Series out of nowhere. So I just wanted to point that out. But I think this is a case of the baseball butterflies. This is a team that went through a pretty hefty makeover, I'd say, this past offseason, signing, I don't know, like 7 or 8 new faces, Corey Kluber, Jameson Taillon among them. So the pitching has been porous to start. That's definitely been something that has been a point of emphasis the last couple of seasons. Obviously, no Luis Severino, and that is huge for the Yankees because he is a really dominant 1B in my mind to Garrett Cole's 1A. No, so not having him there is obviously not helping them. But Kluber and Taillon, now we did have a good outing last night that we saw from Kluber. He was sort of missing on his location with his breaking balls. He's lost a little bit of command in my eyes, but he was still effective. Now, granted, it is against the Orioles, so I'm not going to absolutely say, oh my God, Corey Kluber's back to his Cy Young days. No, let's calm down. The pitching has still been lackluster. There are still a couple errors. Taillon hasn't been very good. He's got a 6.23 ERA to start the year, so not exactly the start you were hoping for from the both of them. Domingo Germán, up until tonight and his last start, he had 2 starts, and then he gets sent down to the alternate site. And he just did not look good in any of them. Could have been nerves, could have been just rust from not playing all that time in 2020 with his suspension. And Jordan Montgomery is another player that a pitcher we've dubbed as sort of the help for Garrett Cole. And he's come out rusty. He has a 4.57 ERA right now. And Garrett Cole is the only guy with a sub-2. So that kind of tells you all you need to know about the starting pitching, at least. They pulled Davy Garcia up. He got whacked around by the Orioles the other day. Michael King, who has been their long relief guy, 9 total innings of work. He's got a 0 ERA. He's been really good, but they sent him down. They brought him back up, and he's been all over the place. Lucas Litke, who Ryan knows this very well, I touted as the next effective Yankees bullpen pitcher, who has been horrible to start the year. He has a +7 ERA. And Ryan made fun of me for that, and rightfully so. So I will accept defeat. But the Yankees have had a really good bullpen other than him and Nick Nelson. Darren O'Day has been very good. I like the idea of bringing him in. Jonathan Loaizaga has become an absolute monster on the mound, throwing absolutely filthy stuff to batters. He's got a sub-1.4 ERA right now. So the bullpen's been fine. The starting pitching is blah. Okay, we can just say blah. That's the word we'll use. But the batting has been, my God, the start to this hitting, this offense has been atrocious. Gleyber Torres, he was batting like 120 to start the year. And then he had a conversation with Aaron Boone behind closed doors about his effort, because that came up in a press conference, because he didn't run down hard all the way to first base on a ground ball. Gary Sanchez, he still stinks. Okay. He's following up his horrendous 2020 so far with a sub 200 batting average. He still can't hit the breaking ball. He swings at everything that's outside of the strike zone. He's not a good defensive catcher at all still. Maybe his framing is a little better, but the pass ball thing is still a problem for me. Kyle Higashioka has taken his spot as the everyday catcher. That tells you all you need to know for a guy who's made 2 All-Star teams and finished top 23 in MVP voting in 2017. DJ LeMahieu has been sluggish as well, 2.50 ERA. He's not exactly machining, if we can use that word. We'll coin that term. And everyone's freaking out about Aaron Judge. Ryan, you were doing this today as well. We were texting about it. So long as he gets to play 7 games versus the Astros in the ALCS, or whoever's they're going to see in the ALCS, if that helps him get there, I'm going to be, you know what? Look, just let it happen, baby. Just let it happen. But they started porous. They've kind of turned around. They had that big series against the Indians. Right now, they're beating up the Birds, and this could turn around, but the start has been porous, to say the least, if I can be nice about it.
Yeah, I'm not going to come out here and say I wasn't ever worried, because I was on Saturday's show, I was on last week's show, and the panic button the meter was on. The meter was activated. It was red. It wasn't all the way bright red, but it was red.
It was an orange color.
I was nervous on this team just because of the pitching. And the reason that I have more hope now is because Corey Kluber finally looked like an MLB starting pitcher yesterday. 6 2/3, 1 run, 5 Ks. He hadn't got out of the 4th inning, in any of his previous starts. So that was a huge one for him. We've seen Tyone put a few together. You mentioned Jordan Montgomery. He's a grinder. When he doesn't have his stuff, he still gives you it all. I'm not worried about him. We know what he is. He's not some ace. He's not anything crazy. Garrett Cole's been awesome as always. And Domingo Germán tonight, 7 shutout innings. I mean, you can't say enough about that as a guy who was optioned to start the year. So the rotation, it's going to be a question mark. We're going to be talking about it all year, I'm sure. So that is something on its own. But the bats were really, really weird to me, because even in this kind of stretch, they couldn't hit. They got lucky in one of those games versus Cleveland. It was a Garrett Cole, Shane Bieber ace-off. They couldn't hit a few days ago. So I think the bats have been a question. You mentioned Gary Sanchez. He's in a 2 for 28 slump right now. Remember his 2 homers to start the year. People kind of lost their minds. Said he's back. I think it might be time to really look at Kyle Higashioka. It's not the full-time starter yet, but Aaron Boone has said he's earned more playing time, and rightfully so. 4 homers on the year and only 25 at-bats. That speaks for itself. So I do think when you look at this team, there's a lot of aspects you have to look at. Another thing is Aaron Judge left yesterday's game with soreness, as you mentioned in the 9th inning. He wasn't in the lineup today, probably won't tomorrow. Said he could be used in a big-time spot. My number one thing there is, as you said, I don't know, I won't go that far ALCS because they couldn't even get there last year. But
yeah,
if it takes him from getting off the IL this year, I'll take a few soreness games here and there. I can live with it at that point. But yeah, when I look at the Yankees right now, yesterday I thought was their most complete win of the season. They had 12 hits, I think, their most in a win all season. Today they followed it up with a 6-run game so far. Very solid there. Shutout ball so far. So I like where they're treading. 3 out of 4 in Cleveland, as you mentioned, to get the Tigers coming up. If they get rolling here, I think the worry goes out the window. You can chalk it up as a slow start, and you can kind of focus on getting these innings pitched throughout the end of the year. The bullpen, I just want to mention really quickly, been rock solid. Number 1 bullpen ERA in the league. When you take out some Nick Nelson blowups and Lucas Luque, it's the best bullpen of all time. So I love what they've done there. Jonathan Loizaga has really stepped up. And yeah, I think this team will be fine. I think we know it's been the same team for the last 4 or 5 years. They just weren't hitting to start this year. It was such a low rate. So I do think they will be able to figure it out and weather this storm. Probably a blip on the radar, but we're gonna keep our hopes up. We'll see what happens there. Thomas, I want to shift to the NL East really quickly, especially with the Mets, because the NL East was supposed to be the most competitive division in baseball, right? You had 4 teams that you could really make a legit argument should win this division. And right now the Mets are leading it at 9-9. They're in a battle with the Red Sox. The offense does not look good. It's another classic Jacob DeGrom game. So at 9-9, kind of what have you thought about the Mets so far? They get hot early in the year. They've obviously had a ton of cancellations, but they are winning the division. So what have been your thoughts on this 9-9 start?
Well, classic Mets. Shout out to our boy Jimmy Sullivan here at WFUV. He's a big Mets fan. Mets are going to Met, and that's kind of happened so far. Now, I do have to say, this is one of the strangest things I've seen. Ready? Okay. They are sixth in the MLB right now in team batting average at 243. So they're definitely whacking the ball. They're fourth in on-base percentage and team on-base percentage at 329. That's fourth in the MLB. But they are last in runs batted in. So they can get on base. They can whack the ball around. They do all these things. They just can't drive the runners in. Now, there are a couple of concerns I have throughout this Mets lineup, and I have to start with Francisco Lindor, the guy with a smile. He loves to smile and he loves to play baseball. And those are two things that I could never ask for more from a person as a baseball player. He's only batting 212. And that is a little concerning. Now, could this be the adjustment to Citi Field and the Mets and the whole National League thing? I think we can say that that's definitely the case. Jeff McNeil, their other all-star from 2019, he's been slow to get out of the gate, batting under 200 at 196. And Dom Smith, who's another productive offensive player, he's only batting 217. So those are three super important people in that Mets lineup who are just not hitting very well right now. And when you look at this Mets lineup from a roster or lineup construction standpoint, they're an American League lineup in terms of the bats that they have, the people they have on their team. JD Davis, Brandon Nimmo, Conforto, he can whack the baseball. Kevin Pillar is a solid baseball player all around. So there's definitely like guys here. If this was an American League team and they had that DH, this could be a really good team. But National League, the pitchers hit, and the weird case of the Mets being the Mets on offense, I feel bad because I want them to actually do well. As wild as that is for me to say as a Yankees fan, I enjoy watching them, and I really want them to do well because when New York baseball is really good, the MLB is really good. And you can say that for any sport, but the bats have been suspect to start. And the last DeGrom start was actually last night against Boston. 2-1, the Mets lost. And they just could not give DeGrom any help at all. DeGrom, as always, was dominant. He had that shutout versus the Nationals where he had 15 strikeouts, followed up with a great performance last night. But they just can't get the runners to the dish. And that's a problem. Now, it is early on, like you said, and we said at the start of this topic, at the start of this segment, baseball is a marathon. It is not a sprint. You can turn a season around by the All-Star break and make a pretty good playoff run. There's proof in that pudding recently, like I just said, with the Nationals. So the Mets, I feel like they can turn around, and their pitching has actually been very good, Ryan. There's been a very good pitching staff. DeGrom's got some help. Marcus Stroman, the Stro Show, he's been electrifying as always, 2.25 ERA. Taijuan Walker, who they signed in this offseason, he's been pretty solid as their number 3 guy. And they have Carlos Carrasco on ice. So that's 4 legitimate good pitchers, 3 legitimate support behind Jacob deGrom. So this Mets rotation is definitely primed to keep them in games. The offense just needs to wake up. It's as simple as that. It's as simple as that.
Yeah, DeGrom's actually going tonight, but the same thing applies because they're down 1-0 through 8. So not looking good for the Mets. DeGrom went 6, 1 run, which his ERA goes up from that. I mean, that's just absurd. That shows how good he's been. I don't know if it's just Mets are going to Met here. You know, I'm going to defend the other side of the city really quick because, I mean, at 9-9, it's fine, but I think this Mets team does have a lot of promise. The rotation, you just talked about those 3 guys. They all have sub-3 ERAs. Another guy you didn't mention, David Peterson. He's pitched quality starts, which I would beg for at the current Yankees slate at least. And Syndergaard as well will be returning this year. And at the same point, Edwin Diaz looks like he has turned the table there. So they do have a legit closer. I think they will be fine. I do think they will be in the playoffs. But I do think at the same time, with all the Yankees struggles, it's kind of flown under the radar with the Mets, right? Run differential is such an important stat in baseball throughout the full season. It kind of shows how legit you are, how fluky you are. And they actually have a worse run differential than the last place Yankees. They're getting outscored by 12 runs, Yankees 6 runs. So I think that's interesting. And to go off Lindor really quickly, because you brought up his really slow start, 212. He talked about yesterday in his postgame, it's the first time in his life he's ever been booed, right? He was booed at Citi Field yesterday after another 0 for performance. I do think at the same time you're adjusting to a new market, new city. That certainly plays a factor. But if you want to look into his last 600 at-bats, which is pretty much a full season, he's shockingly league average. 250 average, 99 weighted runs created plus, which you couldn't be more average than that. So I do think, that is a little interesting. I'm not going to go out and say, maybe that contract was a mistake, but it's it certainly looked like he hasn't had the production of his past recently. So we're going to have to keep an eye on that. But yeah, you also mentioned Jeff McNeil, Dom Smith. They definitely need to wake up. But I think with this rotation and Taijuan Walker could be the signing of the offseason, Marcus Stroman accepting that qualifying offer has been so big for them. They'll be fine. David Peterson as a 4 right now. You get Carrasco and Tinder back. Those are 6 starters that 90% of teams will be dying to have. So at 9-9 right now, they are winning their division. So, I mean, you can't do much more than that. I guess you got to keep winning games, and you got to hope the NL East keeps struggling the way it is.
Now, I do want to say for Lindor getting booed, that to me that's lunacy, because he's such a great player, and he's such a nice guy. He is such a nice guy, Ryan. It's impossible to hate the guy. But yeah, the bats need to wake up, and I feel that they'll definitely turn around. But this division is so tough because you got the Phillies, who they could be good. I mean, the 4th place Phillies, I know that's the joke, but they could be good. You've got the Braves, who are just the Braves, and they're missing Soroka, who's their ace. So they're not even at full strength. The Marlins are surprising the heck out of, I think, everybody, because they've got a really nice roster. Kim Eng has done a really good job. Great hire by former Yankee legend Derek Jeter, who we still love and support. So go Marlins in that aspect. But this division, like you said, is a really, really tough division to kind of gauge, because of just, it's been a flop so far. Not everyone's very good. I mean, the Braves can't exactly score runs. We saw that struggle versus the Yankees, and the Yankees can't score runs themselves in that series. And, I don't know. It's such a tough division to gauge. I feel like the Mets can pull away because they have the best pitcher in all of baseball. He's in the GOAT pitcher discussion for some people. Okay. That's how good DeGrom is. He has a great support behind him with Stroman, Walker. When Cookie comes back, Syndergaard comes back, David Peterson, like you mentioned, he's been very solid for them, and Edwin Diaz. By the way, that walk-up song is awesome. I found it on Spotify. It's been on repeat the last 3 days. I love that song. But he's finally been the closer we've expected. He's that Seattle Mariners closer that we saw, that all-star in 2018. 2.25 ERA. He's got 2 saves so far, but he's been pretty much lights out. I mean, there's been a couple oopsies here and there, but he's looked way better than he did in his first year. And I think he's going to, with a full season, he'll really follow up with a quality closer mentality. The bullpen it's blah right now. Okay. Trevor May kind of got to a slow start, and that was the big lefty specialist guy, and he really wasn't out of the gates well, but he's kind of put that beside him. He's sub 3.5 ERA right now. And you know what? I feel like they can win this division. There's definitely a team there that can do it. They've got a ton of bats. James McCann, we forgot to mention, they significantly upgraded the catcher position because Wilson Ramos, have fun in Detroit, but dude, he had no knees. He couldn't move back there. Couldn't throw anyone out anymore. And he's just an old man for baseball, at least. And that's nothing against him. His father time is undefeated. He will always be undefeated. But James McCann is a significant upgrade. They've plugged a lot of holes. I really like this Mets team. I think at least a wild card spot is reasonable, but I think they can win this division. They've got the talent to do it. They've got the pitching to do it. It's just a matter of, can everything just click? Can the bats wake up? That's it. That's all it's going to take.
Yeah, it's funny we bring up how the NL East has really not led up to our expectations, because now we're going to shift to the division, which I think has been the talk of baseball and is really, we couldn't ask for better games than these Dodger-Padres games. I know it's a regular season. I know it's early, but these games have been playoff worthy. I've seen some tweets where, let's just please start the World Series now. Give Dodgers-Padres 25 games, and we'll be all entertained. So we're going to talk about that now, the Dodgers and Padres. And first off, it's interesting that we're having this one because the Padres are actually 4th in the division right now. But, we've seen what they've done after that series win against the Dodgers. We know they'll be there at the end of the day. So Dodgers-Padres, they just came off a big series. Padres come back from 6 runs late in the game. I think that's the game of the regular season. Thomas, from your perspective, which of these two teams, obviously the Dodgers coming off a World Series win, do you think is better suited for the long run and can really do damage in the playoffs?
Ryan, I think this is going to be the hardest question I will ever answer in my lifetime. This might be the hardest discussion to have in my lifetime. These teams are just mirror twins of each other. They're identical. It's like you're staring at your evil twin in the mirror at home. and you just see the devil. He's got the horns peeking out from the back on one side, and then you're just the angel with a little halo. I don't know who the heck to pick. This is such a tight matchup, I feel. But I want to start the most important thing in baseball, starting pitching. And having really good starting pitching can take you great distances and miles, okay? The Dodgers have Clayton Kershaw, Walker Buehler, Trevor Bauer, who won, as he says in his words, the Mickey Mouse Cy Young last year, Julio Urias, Dustin May, Tony Gonsolin's on ice. Okay, the bullpen's pretty good. Blake Trinan, Brusarol Gratterall, who's a monster. They have Kenley Jansen. David Price is the long relief guy. He's not that good anymore, but still David Price. He can still give you a couple good innings of work when he can. So, and the Padres have Darvish. They've got Snell. Joe Musgrove's been really good so far. Ryan Weathers is coming along. Dinelson Lamet is on ice. Mike Clevenger is on ice. Chris Paddock, I think he's going to get demoted to the bullpen. To me, he's really not that good, but he's definitely another weapon that they have in that stable of pitchers. And then their bullpen is Tim Hill, Drew Pomerantz, Emilio Pagan, Austin Adams, Nick Ramirez, Mark Melancon, Craig Stammen. So, there's, from the pitching aspect, they're nearly identical to me. And given on whoever you like on any given day, it's tough to say. But I like this Padres rotation. I like their bullpen stable that they've got. I feel that their rotation can really carry them. Blake Snell and Yu Darvish. Now, we know Blake Snell is famous for getting pulled early, but when he's one of the best pitchers in baseball. And there's no doubt about that. He's got some serious stuff. He's a southpaw. He throws gas. He's competitive as anyone that you'll find. Yu Darvish he can throw like 11 pitches. That in and of itself is just annoying to deal with. Joe Musgrove coming over from the Pirates, finally in a place where he will succeed. Ryan Weathers, who's the younger pitcher on their team, he's stepped up quite a bit. He's got a sub 0.6 ERA right now, Ryan. Did you know that? He got a 0.59 ERA. He's actually pretty good. Dinelson Lamet's coming back soon. Mike Clevenger is on ice. They've got 6 legitimate guys who can strike out any lineup, any given day when they feel like it. And they can absolutely shut you down. So from the pitching aspect, I have to give it to San Diego. But the bats, I have to give the bats to the Dodgers, okay? They've got 2 of the top 5 players in baseball in Cody Bellinger and Mookie Betts. Come on, that's not fair. That's literally not fair. That's like putting Babe Ruth and Barry Bonds in the same lineup. It's not fair because they're just going to mash a combined 200 home runs. Now, I'm exaggerating, but they're just that good. On the Padres side, you've got Fernando Tatis, who's probably the most exciting player in baseball. Manny Machado is his Robin to Tatis's Batman. Eric Hosmer, who's got like the hardest hit percentage of baseballs right now. He's got 16 RBIs. Trent Grisham's severely underappreciated. He's really good. And both of the teams have really good supporting casts. So the pitching I'll give to San Diego, but the bats, the Dodgers, this is just such a hard one to pick, Ryan. I really think it's tough. It's really tough.
Yeah. The reason that I like the Dodgers more long-term, it's simple for the first reason is that the Padres, and this is projecting, but Padres will very likely have to go through a wild card game. Mm-hmm. And in that wild card game, anything can happen. They might face Jacob deGrom, who was a 0.5 ERA this season. So I don't want to put my stock in a team who one bad outing, one bad pitch, and it's over. The Dodgers have won, I think, 11 straight, 10 straight, NL West. I expect them to do so this year. They are on top right now. So I like them from that aspect. You talked about the rotation. I think that something in the playoffs that matters so much that we don't necessarily talk about is your starters that don't start, right? They might not have the best actual bullpen when you look at their 7, 8, 9 guys, but having a Gonsolin and a World Series winner like David Price, and then maybe a Julio Urias in the pen who can eat innings is huge when it comes to playoff time. We saw Urias, he closed out the World Series Game 6 with 2 1/3 perfect innings of baseball. So I think when you look at that, they have the deeper rotation. Obviously, Mike Clevenger's out for the year. Yu Darvish has a 5.1 postseason ERA. He's kind of struggled in the big moment before. So for that reason, I'm going to go with the Dodgers. We're going to wrap up our talk here just to give a quick Mets update. They officially lost 1-0. Dominic Smith, who we just mentioned, has been struggling, strikes out to end the year. So Jacob deGrom falls to 2-2 with a 0.51 ERA. You really just can't make that up. Tough loss for the Mets to fall 9-10. So, yeah, we're going to go to break here. We're going to come back with some NBA talk. We're going to talk Knicks. We're going to talk some power rankings. It'll be a fun last segment to end the show. Stay tuned. Welcome back to One-on-One Nightly. Our last segment of the show has been a great one so far, and we're going to start with the Knicks. The Knicks right now are about 90 seconds away from winning another game. Thomas has the sweatshirt. Love to see it. So 35-28 is likely what they're about to go to. The 9-game win streak was finally snapped, but they get back in the win column, assuming, this holds up here, up 15 plus on the Bulls. So they will keep the 4 seed. They'll take sole possession from the Hawks with 9 games to go. And really, we're just going to look at the state of the Knicks because obviously it's been an awesome year, right? We go on this show every week. We talk about how we didn't see this coming. Story of basketball, talk of the town. The New York Knicks are finally relevant again. But really, if we're being honest, we want a top 4 seed, right? We're both Knicks fans. You want the Knicks to get home field advantage. And to do so, they have a crucial schedule coming up. And I kind of outlined, Thomas, what they need to go. And this win against the Bulls is a huge step forward because I kind of broke the schedule down into 3 phases, which I'll do right now. Starting up, I got the first 3, which I said you absolutely need to go 2-1 at the minimum with the Bulls and then at Houston and then at Memphis. So they start off with a 1-0 and they will play, obviously, the worst team in basketball and the Rockets next. Then they're going to have to split a brutal 4 games at Denver, at Phoenix, at Clippers, at Lakers. It's a West Coast road trip. Splitting those games, I think, is the best case scenario. And then you close it out with the Spurs, Hornets, and Celtics. Winning 2 out of 3 would be best case. So 6-4, 7-10. I think that will be enough to stay in the 5-4 range, get out of the play-in game, which I do not want to get into. What are your thoughts on what the Knicks need to do out here to kind of succeed to finish the year?
Ryan, it's been a long 8 years since the Knicks have made the playoffs, but now they finally have the chance to go back. Now, if you can't tell what team I like, then please go get your eyes checked. But they really need to come out here and win at least 2 out of these next 3. Like you said, they've got the first one first, the Bulls, and they're going to play the Rockets. Now, the Rockets don't have John Wall. So who are they going to stop? Christian Wood? I have no idea. Is he even healthy? This Rockets team just isn't healthy. Jayshawn Chait, is that like the guy they've got? I don't know. So I kind of see that they can grab that one. And then Memphis, they played down to the wire. Now, we bring up Memphis is very interesting because RJ Barrett has drawn the who's better, Ja Morant, RJ Barrett discussion. We see it on NBA Twitter. There's people who think, oh, Morant, because he's a point guard, won Rookie of the Year. No, RJ Barrett because of Zion. And like he kind of stopped. Please, the debate's over. RJ Barrett he's been so much better. Now, statistically, he's not as much of a marvel as Morant. Barrett is averaging 17.5 points. Almost 6 rebounds. The assists are around like 2.5. I'd like to see that get up to 4, but 39% from 3. Ja Morant. Now Ja Morant's averaging over 20, but here's the thing. Ja Morant is not winning games like RJ Barrett's winning games. Okay. RJ Barrett has elevated himself from inefficient rookie stuck on a team who they had no direction last year. Now he's jumped up to, okay, this kid's legit. He's really good at basketball. And he's elevated his 3-point percentage to 39%. Last year, he shot barely above 30. It was like 0.3 above that. So he's taken serious steps forward. And that's what you like to see. And he has silenced the haters who say Ja Morant's better. How dare you? How dare you say that? RJ Barrett. And here's another thing I've noticed. You've probably noticed this too, Ryan. He's not going to take the final shot. I think we can both agree he's not the guy that's going to Jordan Open Chicago with like that. That's not him. He will get you to that point. I think he gets you to where you need to be. He can almost close a game out. He can just about clean up shop. He can't lock up the door. So RJ Barrett in that aspect, he's been phenomenal for the Knicks. And on this crazy streak they're going on, you just mentioned they're going to beat the Bulls. They're doing this. Alec Burks just came back this game. Mitchell Robinson's been out for I lost track at this point for how long he's been out. Nerlens Noel's been in and out of the lineup. The centers of that team have been beat up. Derrick Rose had COVID, and they're still winning. And the next man up thing with Tom Thibodeau, it's been a phenomenal season. But then we go to this West Coast 4-game bloodbath. Okay, Denver, you got to deal with the potential, most likely MVP in Jokic. You got to deal with Devin Booker again and Chris Paul, who we'll get into, I think, in a bit. The Clippers and the Lakers in successive games. Then you come home to play the San Antonio, the Charlotte Hornets, who are beat up as well, and then the Boston Celtics. So not exactly a cakewalk here towards the end, but 2-1 in the minimum this first stage. If they can go 2-2 in the West Coast swing, I think that would be a massive success. I think they can definitely come back and beat Phoenix this time around for this next game, because they're definitely, infuriated about that last game. And I think you can steal one from the Lakers. They are also beat up with injuries. So I think there's definitely, you can steal one of those games. And then at home, you just kind of have to casually defend the Garden. And then you go to the playoffs and the Knicks will be back. And they will be a team to be reckoned with, folks. Don't you ever forget it. Now, I have my hoodie and my sunglasses on. I am overly confident about this team. They have been massive overachievers this year, but that doesn't take away from the fact we can't applaud what they've done. And they have set themselves up well for the future. They've got really good free agency, drafting, re-signing people. There's a plan in place for the on-court product for what they're going to produce. So the Knicks are back, baby. What else you got to say?
Listen, I'm just as happy to see them win as you. I do think we need to slow our roll just a little bit, because there are 4 right now. They're still only like a game and a half difference from the 7. So if you lose to these teams that are better than you, right? Because these four games we talk about, Denver, Phoenix, Clippers, Lakers, those teams are better basketball teams than the Knicks. What the Knicks do is they give it 110% every night. They give you it all. And if you're not ready for it and you come out flat, they're going to stomp you. And that's what they've done recently. But if they do lose to those games, they could easily be a 7. And now you lose in the play-in game. I mean, I do think we need to slow our roll a little bit, right? We have 9 more games. Let's get to those 9 games first, Thomas, please, because it's such a long time since it's been there. So I do think that's important. Julius Randle, by the way, 34th tonight. RJ Barrett with 22. They won by 19 against the Bulls. The game is over. So you love to see that. It's a great way to start this stretch, because coming off a 9-game win streak, you do lose a game where Chris Paul hits every shot in the book. You don't know how they're going to bounce back, but Tom Thibodeau has them playing hard. So it's nice to see them kind of weather the storm here, get the win. We talked about 9 games left. Just figure it out, piece it together. And in the playoffs, honestly, I've talked about this before, I would not want to see the Knicks if I'm the Hawks, and even if I'm the Bucks. Worst case scenario, they fall to 6. Because of how hard they play every night and because of how good that defense is, they will be prepared for the playoffs, I think, better than most teams, especially like a Hawks young team like that. So I do think when you're looking at it like that, you do want to avoid the Knicks. That's my, unbiased perspective. But obviously they don't have the talent to do big things this year. I saw a report the other day, which I hate these. I don't know about you, that reported stars want to come here now. They've had Kawhi Leonard has talked. Can we just focus on how good this team is now? Why are we talking about Zion 5 years down the road? Why are we talking about Kawhi? Let's just focus on this good basketball team we have in front of us, Thomas.
Yeah, please. I mean, please. It's not worth it, because they're going to go, oh, the Knicks did get people. Ooh. Please just enjoy the moment. Enjoy what has been put in front of you. That's like putting someone else's kid after your own kid has given you everything that you've just adored and raised and loved. And then, I'm going to just move on from you. Like, come on. That's just brutal. But the free agency conversation is interesting. This class is somewhat underwhelming, I'd say. We don't have to talk about it, but that's my little spiel. But I also want to discuss how impressed I am with Julius Randle. Last year was probably the most disliked player on that team. I don't think that's up for debate. No one liked him. The spinning, the turnovers, the other nonsense on the court. Last year he shot 28% from 3-point land. Okay. And people were ripping on the guy. He had to block Knicks fan pages. He was blocking Knicks fans. No comments in his Instagram post. Don't talk to me. That's what his message was. He's come back this year. Ryan, he's shooting 42% from 3. That's a 14% increase from what he was shooting last year. And he made the All-Star game. He's in line for probably most improved player. I think he should get the award with the turnaround he's had. 24 points, 10 rebounds, 6 assists. He leads the team in everything. He's a monster. And you look now, back when they first got him, this is what he was supposed to be. That bargain all-star kind of leads you into the playoffs as a modest seed, maybe in that mid to lower echelon of playoff teams in a normal year, at least. The playoff thing as well, I don't like that at all. We can talk about that another day, but he's lived up to what we expected him to be as fans. We expected this to be a bargain, and now it's become a bargain officially. So they've been awesome. They've made me happy. I can sleep at night. Finally, I get 7 hours instead of 6. I spend $5 more dollars, excuse me, when I'm buying pizza, because I'm just that happy. I would like to eat, just toast the slice to them. So, and you also add the neophytes, Obi Toppin and Emmanuel Quickly. The character is so imperative in today's NBA. You need to have culture. Theo Pinson deserves a max contract. He's like the MC of the team. I love watching him on the bench, even though he doesn't play. His little phone call thing, his little dances, jumping around. Everyone's jumping around happy. When was the last time you ever saw that with a Knicks team? It was just these gloomy veterans on these 1-year deals, and it wasn't fun. And now it's finally fun, and this team was completely written off. So it's great to see what they've put together, and Julius Randle has been heading the pilot of that. I've loved every second of it this year. It's made me so happy. You can't tell I'm smiling and laughing as I talk, but you go. I'm just so proud.
I think if Julius Randle just like continued his New Orleans progression, it wouldn't be anything out of the ordinary. But because of how much he struggled last year, to come back and to look like you really want it, right? Get into shape, work on the jump shot all offseason. I think the COVID pause helped the Knicks so much more than other teams because, one, they were able to grow, they were able to work out, and they didn't get tired. Some of these teams coming off the bubble, we've seen Jamal Murray's get hurt. We've seen LeBron's and Anthony Davis's. We've seen the Nets and all their injuries. The Knicks had 9 months off, so they were eager to get back into playing basketball. And you can just tell with this team, they like to play basketball. I know Austin Rivers is no longer on this team, but he said something very early in the year that I'll never forget. He says, no, trust me. I've been on bad teams before. This is not one of them. This is not a bad basketball team. And I kind of laughed it off like, we're 3-4. Like, come on, relax. But he was right, man. And this Knicks team is no joke. They are legit. I saw them top 10 in the power rankings earlier this year. So we'll see what happens there. Kind of just to end our show, speaking of the top 10, top 5 power rankings, what we're going to do here, obviously coming off the Suns game, I'd expect to see them maybe in your top 5. What is your top 5 looking like, Thomas? What kind of towards this then stretch of the year, right? 10 games. So who are kind of your top 5 teams kind of going into the playoffs here?
Okay, so just for the disclaimer of the audience, I don't have the Bucks in my top 5, and for reasons being, I don't trust them in the playoffs. They have not shown me any promise in the playoffs. I mean, they lost to the Miami Heat last year. In the bubble, they got beat up by the Magic in some games. So I don't have them in my top 5. So here's a team that I think slipped in here that I think you and I are going to really say, oh, that's really interesting. The Denver Nuggets. Okay. They started this season like snails. They were slow. They sloppy. They couldn't play defense. And now here they come. Here come the Nuggets. Jamal Murray gets hurt. Oh my God, the world's going to end for the Denver Nugget fans and the fan base in Colorado. Oh my God. Okay. Michael Porter Jr. is the guy that the Knicks should have taken. We won't talk about it. We will not talk about that. But Michael Porter Jr. has stepped up. He has become the second fiddle to Nikola Jokic, who was my MVP. I would not want to see this team in the playoffs. They have just snuck up on everybody. And I know that the Knicks, they've been the story of the year and This Denver team is dangerous. On offense, they are potent. They've got every weapon in the book. They've got every shot play in the book. Will Barton, you've got Michael Porter Jr., Jokic, as I just said, Paul Millsap. I call him Captain Sap as like his little nickname. He's like the captain of the team. He's the connoisseur of defense on their side. They've got some real players on that team. And they have the Italian guy, Campazzo, who's kind of come out of nowhere. He's exciting. I love him. Shout out to the Italians. But this Denver team has slipped into that top 5 for me. I just think they're too dangerous. Mike Malone's too good of a coach. I can see them make another conference finals run in the West. It's definitely possible. They've got the talent to do it. They've got, I think, the MVP, like I just said, Michael Porter Jr., like I just said, really stepped up this year. And when the Nuggets are on, you can't stop them because they'll just hit everything. They shoot too well. They play too much offense to the point where your defense becomes non-existent. So I really like this Denver team a lot. Another team that I like, who I think is going to also be super sneaky. Well, not really, but the Los Angeles Clippers. Okay. The Kawhi, Paul George thing, playoff P, way off P, whatever you want to call him, backboard George, whatever you want to say about him. Okay. But adding Rajon Rondo and adding DeMarcus Cousins, I think those are going to really shine in the playoffs, especially with playoff Rondo, because that's also a thing. Rondo is very dangerous. Okay. He can glue your team together in terms of ball handling, playmaking, and defense. He's a slippery, a sleuthy point guard. Now, he's not the all-star he was, obviously, and he still can't shoot a jump shot to save his life. But everything else he does at an incredibly elite level. And I think that that's going to really boost this Clippers team. I think trading Lou Williams was a good thing to get Rondo. I think that was a great trade that they made. And I just like adding Boogie. They needed another big. There's giants in the West that you have to go up against. And this is definitely a way to do it. I think the Nuggets and the Sixers are my two teams outside of, or the Nuggets and the Clippers, outside of the Sixers, Lakers, and the Nets as the top three that I think we should pay attention to.
Yeah, so that top three that you mentioned, Nets, Lakers, Sixers, I think that's pretty universal that they're in there. And a team I have right up there is the Phoenix Suns. I think that they have the perfect combination of vets and like young nucleus. The Jazz, I don't have as high as the Suns, even though they currently have the game better. But I just think they're too young. I think in the playoffs, obviously Donovan Mitchell balled out last year. Obviously they took the Nuggets to 7, blew a 3-1 lead. I just don't think they have the experience. And with Chris Paul, I think that was such an important addition. And I'll put my hand up. I was not a fan. I thought it was an overreaction to the bubble. I thought that things weren't going great. I thought he wouldn't move the needle, and he has. Like, I'm not even going to list his stats because that's disrespectful to him. Because when you watch him play, he is so much more than his stats. He is a leader on and off the court, and he just has an effect on teams. Look, everywhere he's been, he makes them better. There's a graphic going around viral. It's just every team before and after, and then after he left, and it's literally before is worse. Once he's there, it's better. Once he leaves, it falls apart. And that's exactly the impact he has on these guys. Devin Booker, I like that he's averaging 25 instead of 30. I like that he's got his shots down and he's able to play with the Chris Paul, because that was a thing that I think a lot of people question. How are they going to be able to play together? DeAndre Ayton, too, I think. Obviously, Luka Doncic, right? He was the right pick at 1. They should have went him. And I think that has led to Ayton kind of falling under the radar here because he's a double-double machine. He's a walking double-double, 15 and 11 this year on 62% of the field. So he's not missing shots. He's grabbing rebounds. He's scoring points. I think him and Booker are an elite combination here, both still super young. I think CP3 has meant the world to them. And then Mikal Bridges, he had a huge game against the Knicks. He's a perfect 3-and-D player for this NBA. I think the Sixers drafting and then trading him when his mother was in the organization is an all-time screw-up. So he's averaging 13 a game on 40% from the field. So I have the Suns in that top 5, along with the Clippers bottoming it out. I think we're in agreement there. But, yeah, so I have the Suns. You have the Nuggets as kind of that last team in there.
I'm not totally sold on the Suns just yet. I feel from them really being a great contender. They're about a year and a half away. I feel that the power forward situation is somewhat sus. I mean, Jay he's okay. Saric is fine. So the platoon, I guess, makes up for it now. But like I just said before, there are giants out there in that West. You got to deal with Porzingis, who he can be hit or miss, but he's a humongous human being. There's Anthony Davis, who needs no introduction. Rudy Gobert, again, a massive human. Zion Williamson, he's going to be one day, the Pelicans will figure it out, and then you got to deal with him. I don't know. Do you need Ray Lewis to deal with Zion Williamson? I have no idea. He's just that strong. And then you also have to not ignore the fact that San Antonio, they're gonna find a way to get another successor to Tim Duncan, a big who's just dominant. Karl Anthony Towns, theoretically, if he was in the playoffs, you got to deal with him. Portland's got Enes Kanter, who's as strong as an ox. He's a large man. And, there's these teams that just have these dominant big men. And you just go, how are we going to deal with this? And now Aiden's a big boy, okay? He's no slouch. He's 7 feet tall. He's 250. He's another gigantic human. So you definitely have to deal with that. And I think if they figure that out, the Suns, they're a year away, but I think they'll be ready come next year. Next year is their time.
Really quickly, because we're about to leave the airwaves here, I do have the Suns over the Nuggets simply because of that Jamal Murray injury. I think that was crucial for them. But yeah, so we're going to wrap it up here. Thank you guys so much for listening. Special thanks to Bobby Chaffardini, our sports director, for Alex Woltz, our producer, for Kayla also for producing. Great job there. For Thomas Halo, I'm Ryan Gregware. One-on-One is a production of WFUV Sports.
you.